Oh, it went. Now do I go back to me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it does automatically. Whoops. There's a whole bunch of settings on here. It's because I'm on Facebook, right?
Just press go live. Press garden with Nancy.
All right, there we are. Welcome, everyone. I can see that people are registering and signing in, so welcome to Gardening Live with Nancy. We are going to wait a few minutes and just get people registered, and while we're doing that, let me just tell you a little bit about this. This is our first webinar that we are hosting ourselves, so please bear with us if you see us fumbling around. We're also streaming this live on Facebook, so that's pretty exciting as far as that is concerned. For those of you that have questions, please use the Q&A and type your questions in, because we're not going to be enabling the audio for you at this point. So please use the Q&A for questions. I do have a helper here. Our marketing assistant, Joanna, is going to be helping monitor the questions, and I'm hoping this will go as smoothly as possible. My name is Nancy Robertson, and I'm a realtor with Sotheby's International Realty here in Canada. But I'm also a master gardener. I got my master gardener's diploma, or I don't know whether it was a diploma, I can't remember, at the University of British Columbia when I was living in Vancouver. And I went back to school and did my landscape design diploma as well, and ran a landscape design business in British Columbia for a number of years, actually. But here in Oakville, I am a realtor, and I'm happily a realtor. Love to sell real estate, and but continue to get lots of gardening questions. And so when things quietened down as far as COVID-19 was concerned, the Halton Environmental Network first asked me to do a garden webinar with them. That was a few weeks ago. It actually went pretty well. And there was lots of questions. So we decided that we would try and host our own garden webinar and see how it goes. So, so welcome to all of you. That's a little bit of a preamble of who I am. Again, we're going to be using the Q&A. So if you have questions, please just use your, type in a question on the Q&A, and we will answer them that way. I did get some questions in advance, so we're going to start with those. And before we do that, I would like to say that the webinar is scheduled to last for an hour. And if we get, so it's scheduled to last for an hour. We've decided for this webinar to try and raise awareness of a new charitable organization that the Oakville Community Foundation has started called the Resiliency Fund. And they are hoping to raise the profile and also some donations for for our frontline workers, not just at the hospital, but actually in long-term care facilities, doctors' offices, you name it. They have a long list. So please, if you're going to participate in this garden webinar, we would love it if you would give a small donation to their resiliency fund. Go on to the Oakville Community Foundation's website, and you'll see click on the resiliency fund, and there's a donate button there. I think that's it. I think we'll start with our very first question, which actually is a question from Liz in River Oaks. Liz asks, first of all, claims that she's the only person that can't grow anything in her garden in River Oaks, and I personally don't believe that. I actually believe that anybody can grow anything in the garden. The trick is to be sure to plant the right thing. And this is where people get hung up. So Liz goes on to say that she has a lot of trees and many surface roots, and she can't grow hostas or even ferns, and she thinks that all flowering plants are eaten by rabbits or bugs. And then the trees also seem to have tiny red spiders, and there's moss in the grass, and the vegetable garden puts her to shame. So I'm not going to talk much about vegetables here because that's a topic all unto itself, and my specialty is perennials, garden design, care of your garden, and so that's where I'm going to concentrate. So Liz, there's lots of aspects to this question. Firstly, and this applies to lots of people, firstly, when you have a heavy shaded garden, which it sounds like you have, it is pretty difficult to grow most plant material. There's two issues. The shade, of course, will prevent those perennials that like to bloom, because most perennials that like to bloom would like the sun. So that's going to be a problem right off the bat. Secondly, though, because the trees have such a dense surface root system, they actually take all the nutrients and all the water, and there's nothing much left over for the plants that you've tried to plant on top. So it's a problem. And you know, I've seen people actually put astroturf under a dense, mature maple tree. Of course, that's not exactly what you want to do, but sometimes you have to work with what you've got. And mulch is a great leveler for underneath a heavy maple tree or any tree, including coniferous trees, you know, the evergreen trees. Put a layer of mulch down. And then I would suggest that you mentioned container gardening, and I would certainly suggest that container gardening is not a bad way to go. You know, you can do a grouping of planters if it's a dominant place in your garden, or just leave it mulched, nicely edged, and put your focus on somewhere else in the garden, either a planter that's on the walkway, at the top of the driveway, near your garage door, near your front door. You know, take your eye away from the impossible place to plant. Spiders in your trees. I think little red tiny spiders, and wonder if they're a problem. Well, they might be a problem. But the thing is, with large trees, it's very hard to spray for bugs in large trees. So the key thing really, and if anybody has a tree that needs some work, be sure to call a certified arborist to come and do the analysis of your trees. There's a lot of people, a lot of tree pruners out and around. Basically, they have a truck and they think they can prune a tree. But in fact, you know, and care for a tree. But in fact, they don't have the skills and the knowledge. So I would certainly be sure that you get a certified arborist in, and they will analyze what the bug problem is. Sometimes a spray is required. Sometimes it's just a matter of improving the watering on the trees so that the plant is healthy and the bugs don't attack it. And that's actually, you know, brings me to a really good point about the care of your plant material. the basic, if you really want to have a healthy garden, look after the basics. Make sure that you're watering well. Make sure that it's not overwatered. I mean, overhead watering. So try and get the water into the ground and not spray the top of the plant. Oftentimes that overhead spray will cause fungus and or other, issues with the plant material. So it's recommended always to water underneath. Moss. Well, the fact that you're getting moss in your garden is two things. One is that it's shady, because moss loves shade. And secondly, sometimes it can mean that it is getting enough moisture, but primarily moist means shade. And you're not going to be able to do anything about the shade unless you get rid of the trees. But let me tell you, the trees have big value in gardens, so that is not something I would suggest that you do. As far as flowering plants being eaten by rabbits, yeah, rabbits love it. They particularly love tulip bulbs. There isn't anything really to do about them except plant so many tulip bulbs that they leave some alone because they're so full. Daffodils are not well liked by squirrels, so if you're going to plant some spring bulbs in the fall, a daffodil is a very good option. And I think that covers everything, except that the black spot on tomatoes generally has to do with something in the soil. And so there is lots of material on vegetables and tomatoes and black rot. You'll be able to Google that very, very easily and quickly and get an answer. We've got somebody who's asked a question in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer. What shrubs do you advise for planting in sandy soil? I mean, unless you're talking about a beach, sandy soil is ideal for planting anything. And the reason, because it drains really well. And that's one of the issues. While you have to water plants well, they have to be draining well. So be sure that for those of you that are having issues with watering and it in clay soil where the water builds up and your roots drown, sandy soil, you would add soil to a clay soil. But if you're in sandy soil, you can pretty well plant anything, to be honest. But what you lose in sandy soil is the nutrients, because everything drains away so quickly. So when you this is a soil that you would actually need to fertilize a little bit more often. And fertilization is really through compost and or manure and or a combination of the two things. And you just spread it as a mulch in your garden. You can honestly grow anything. You can grow, if it's sunny or part sunny, you could do hydrangeas, lilacs, just anything. If you need an evergreen shrub, there's lots of choice there as well. So let me know if it's flowering, if it's sunny, or if it's shady, and I'm happy to give you more information. I'm just going to add to just go back and tell everyone, welcome to this first ever gardening live with Nancy. I've got a helper here. Joanna's here monitoring the questions, and I have some questions that were submitted beforehand. We are trying to raise awareness of a program that is a fundraising program that the Oakville Community Foundation has started called the Resiliency Fund. If anybody's interested in making a small donation, I'd love that to be one of the effects of your participation in this garden webinar. So keep that in mind. My name is Nancy Robertson, and I'm a realtor with Sotheby's International Realty. Regarding the care of street trees, what deadwooding would the municipality take care of? You can apply to have the town come and prune your tree. I know that in Oakville, the waiting list was months long, if not longer. But that's what you should do with a municipal tree. Now, they do have a schedule where they will come around and look after a tree. However, it is based on reporting. So if you have an issue with one of your trees, you need to call the town or the city of Burlington or the town of Oakville. And you might have to be persistent with this because, you know, the squeaky wheel always will get the worm. No, what's the expression? But anyway, squeak get the oil. But I certainly, you know, that's the way you go about it. If it's low, you know, if it's a limb that's very low in the tree and you can get it, you know, it might be faster and easier for you to do it, just to prune it off. But in terms of the municipal trees on your property, they are the responsibility of the municipality. It's just that, you know, they've got hundreds of thousands of trees that they look after. And so, you know, the squeaky wheel will get some results. They don't automatically put street trees on their pruning program. So just FYI, as far as that is concerned. We have a question here from Anne, who lives in Aldershot, Burlington. And she's asking about impatiens. So a good garden design incorporates hardscaping, it incorporates trees, and by hardscaping I mean, you know, patios, pathways, you know, stone, fence, an arbor, that's all the hardscaping. So a good garden incorporates some hardscaping, obviously some garden beds, trees, shrubs, both evergreen and deciduous, and perennials and annuals. And so and impatiens is an annual. I love impatiens, and they are a true workhorse in the garden. I think that the question is about impatiens being passé. So I would say that no, impatiens is not passé. The thing is, the design of the way that you plant it is perhaps passé. In our mom and dad's time, people used to outline their gardens with an annual. Whether if they were in sun, it might be a sun-loving annual, and in the shade, it would be something like impatiens. The trick now is that gardens are really, you know, people prefer to see a more natural looking garden. And so with impatiens, you wouldn't perhaps do an outline of a bed necessarily in impatiens, but you might do, you know, 5 or 7 impatiens in a nice scattering clump, and then repeat that elsewhere in the garden and repeat that again elsewhere in the garden. And I would just be careful with the color that you choose. White impatiens is almost impossible to find. Every year, it's not just this year or last year, every year is the same. White impatiens is really tough to find. So find a color that you like, make sure it's all the same color, and then do drifts, what I call drifts of impatiens. And the other part of the question was, would prospective buyers of a home like impatiens in the garden? What I will say, so just to bring real estate into this for 1 nanosecond, you should stage the exterior of your home as you would be working to stage the interior of your home. So with that in mind, prospective buyers would, a bird just hit our window, a little nature, aw. Prospective buyers will like that the garden is tidy and well maintained, and if there's color, then obviously that's going to appeal, you know, improve the curb appeal. And so for that reason, absolutely, impatiens would appeal to a prospective buyer. And then from a design perspective, I would choose all one color, so it's monochromatic, and then I would do drifts of impatiens and not outline a garden. Thank you, Anne, very much for your question. Thank you, Liz, as well, I should say, Liz from River Oaks and from Aldershot. The next question, I'm not sure where this question came from. Was this a Facebook question? Oh, I'm getting Facebook Live questions too. How awesome is this? I love technology. COVID-19, I tell you, it's forcing an old broad to learn new tricks. Japanese knotweed, how to get rid of it. All weeds need to be dug up. It is hard work, but that is what you have to do. You have to painstakingly choose a section of the garden, work away, and get rid of it. It is not a single year task either. It's actually something that you're going to probably need to do. You know, the first year is going to be really hard work. The second year, not so much. And the third year, you should be rid of it. But that's what you need to do. So, you know, and the people, you can Google organic methods of ridding yourself of weeds. They mostly involve vinegar and salt and soap and hot water. I mean, I've seen all sorts of things. The bottom line is it's just hard work. It's just a matter of getting out there and digging and then staying on it so that it doesn't spread back, because that's one of the issues with something like Japanese knotweed. I'm sorry you have that in your garden. Let's go. What would you suggest to grow in a heavy shade area? Again, Liz, I would say that if you are looking for an evergreen option, yew does really well in shade. Most plants, shade-loving plants, grow slower in shade. So keep that in mind. It's, you know, you need to give them time to actually grow to their mature size. And I'm gonna, you know, take this moment to talk about reading plant tags. When you're at the garden center looking for a plant and you're not sure, you know, you don't have somebody there to help, I strongly suggest that you take a moment to read the plant tags carefully. They will tell you how many hours of sunshine that plant needs to be successful. It will tell you the zone, and just so you know, we here in Oakville are generally speaking zone 5, Oakville, Toronto, you know, Burlington, Hamilton, zone 5. You get into Niagara, you're down to zone 6, or up to zone 6, I guess you should say. Just to give you an idea, Vancouver is zone 8, Sault Ste. Marie is zone 4. So, you know, the lower the number, the colder the plant will last. Now, and the thing is that you don't have to, you can try and grow a plant that's marked for zone 8 in a zone 6 area, but you have to recognize that it's considered a tender plant. And so you're going to need to protect it from the cold. Likely you're going to wrap it in burlap in the winter time. So keep that in mind in terms of reading a plant tag. The other thing is the tag will also tell you whether you need to water it well. And you know, the information on those plant tags are actually very important. If for some reason you don't have a plant tag, I wouldn't buy that plant. I would go and buy the plant that has the plant tag. As you can imagine, in a garden center, when they're busy, the plant tags do get misplaced. And so you want to be sure that you're buying what you think you're buying, because they're expensive and you want to be successful. Did I even answer the question that I asked? I went off on a tangent about reading the plant. For growing in shade. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Okay, so then, having said that, garden centers now divide their plant material up, so you can easily go to the shade side or the sunny side, and in fact choose your plant material from there easily and quickly. So that's one recommendation. Make sure you're in the right part of the garden center. Then you have to decide: do you want deciduous? coniferous, how much room do you have? There's so much that to answer a question like that. Rhododendrons like light shade. They don't like dark shade. They do like light shade, and that's because they would be considered a tender shrub here. You know, if you go to Vancouver during rhodo season, they're 20 feet high. But here they grow much slower, don't ever get so big, but they like partial shade. Sweet woodruff, there's all sorts of hostas will love the shade. They prefer the shade. Astilbe is a perennial that loves the shade. So there's lots of choice. Hopefully that gives you some ideas. Okay, we better get to some of the questions. When's choosing plant material? I gotta move this over at the nursery. Any advice worth spending on maturity? That's a good question. Okay, so the person, this continues on what I was talking about when you're choosing plant material at the nursery. Is it worth spending on maturity? You know what? That depends on what it is you're buying. If you're buying, one of the things as a landscape designer, I would draw these amazing plans. And of course, I would design, or I would draw it showing the mature size of the plant in its final, space. And the gardens would then get planted, and people would remark about how much empty space there was between the plants. They thought it was planted too sparsely. So this is a common problem. People then think, okay, it's too far away. I need to plant it closer together in order for it to look better. But the problem with that is that you are going to, it's going to overgrow its space, and then you're going to waste your time and money because you're going to have to dig it up or prune it or move it, or it crowds the next plant out and that plant dies. So, be careful when you're looking at those same plant tags at the nursery, and be sure that you look at the size. And so if it says that it's a 4-foot spread by 6 foot high, that's in maturity, not immediately. That might take 5 to 10 years to mature if it's a shrub, and a tree even longer. Perennials, you should start to see mature size in 2 years. So you need to accommodate that growth, that spread in your garden. And then, of course, just make sure the zones stay within your zone. And we are here, zone 5, zone 6 in some areas. And that I should also point out that some gardens actually have zones within their garden. So for instance, lavender, believe it or not, is considered a tender perennial. But I have a spot where lavender does very well. And if you talk to the people at the Terre Bleue lavender farm, they will tell you that lavender is somewhat tender. But if you have the right spot for it, it will do really well. And that's the key. You might have a zone in your own garden that's one zone warmer than the zone elsewhere. Keep in mind the wind pattern in your garden. Keep in mind the sun, the direction the sun falls all throughout the day. Okay. I could talk about that some more, actually. What is your favorite short stature tree that gets morning sun only? Wow. Okay. Well, morning. Okay, let's talk about sun and shade. Generally, sun-loving plants, generally speaking, need 6 hours of sunshine every day. Okay? So if you want your roses to do well, they need 6 hours. Ditto all those big sun-loving flowers, minimum 6 hours. So if you're getting less than 6 hours, kind of like the 4-hour morning sun, believe it or not, a Japanese maple, that is their favorite. Their favorite is morning sun. They don't like the heavy afternoon sun on them at all. They much prefer a dappled sunlight. So I would say, and I wouldn't call, some Japanese maples would not be considered short. Japanese maples are a beautiful ornamental tree. They are really truly meant not to be pruned unless you're, practicing bonsai on a Japanese maple, which you could. And then you would choose a weeping Japanese maple. So that would be a short stature tree in a very special spot. You could choose one of those. But otherwise, I don't know how short you mean, but there are some ornamental trees, like there's a beautiful paper bark maple that is considered a small ornamental tree, and it will do well in morning. It can do well it doesn't do well in shade. It likes, morning sun would be fine. I have a hydrangea in the back that one would consider as a tree, that's for sure. Dogwood, Cercis canadensis is another tree that would do very well that would be an ornamental and do very well in morning sun. Hopefully that is enough information. Oh, what kind? France is asking, what kind of fertilizer do you recommend for container gardening? I recommend an all-round, equal number. There's 3 numbers on fertilizers. And if all 3 are equal, that's what you're looking for. So, 20-20-20 is a common one. If you're really concerned, the importance for you is the flowering, then you can actually get the middle number higher, and that will boost flowering. So any type of fertilizer, as long as you fertilize your containers, quite frankly, they will perform so much better. You won't believe the difference if you've never done it before. So I highly recommend it. Once a month fertilizing. You can put it in, you can buy the little round pellets that you just toss onto the top of the planter, and then each time you water it, the plant gets the nutrient. That's one way of doing it. You can actually add it to your watering can and mix it in, and then water the plant with the fertilizer in your water. I think probably the easiest is to throw the little pellets of fertilizer onto the top of the planter, and 100% you have to fertilize your planters, 100%. And believe it or not, finally, we are safely able to put our annuals outside. It's going to be really warm this weekend. Apparently, it was so wet last weekend. May the 24th is traditionally the weekend for planting annuals. It was so cold and miserable this past weekend, though. I know that people held off. However, you're good to go now. The fact that it snowed a week ago was a bit of a scary thing, but I think we're good to go now. Jennifer is emailing me. No, you can't see it. No. Oh, Jen, can you email that photo that you want to send? Are you sending your question in from Florida? Because, oh no, you're in Bronte. Because if you're emailing me from Florida, I don't know that I would be very good about answering questions about the plant material in Florida. That would be interesting. France, about the pellets. Oh, don't worry about that. Your root ball is underneath. France asks, the pellets say to stay away from the root ball. Well, the root ball is down underneath the soil, so you don't have to worry about it. You're just going to put the pellets on top of the soil, and then as you water it, it dissolves and the nutrients go to the bottom. So don't worry about that, France. You're good. Good to go. Okay, so I have a question from Kathy, who's actually in Niagara. And she was asking about transplanting a rhododendron. Now, interesting and she tells me that she transplanted this rhododendron in January. Well, January is not the ideal time to be transplanting anything. It's so cold. Now, the advantage to that is that the plant was probably absolutely frozen in the ground, and so probably didn't even realize it was being moved. But Ideally, you want to transplant plant material in the fall or in early spring. And the reason you've chosen those times is because the plant should be as close to dormant as possible. I saw your picture, Kathy, the picture of the rhododendron you sent me. I thought the rhododendron looked really, really well, really healthy. I don't think you need to worry at all. It looks good. It looks like it's survived the transplant completely. I guess, you know, moving forward from that, you just need to make sure that you water it on a consistent basis, and it should be fine. Now, this does bring up the question of transplanting, because people often do this incorrectly. So let me just talk a little bit about transplanting plants. And I'm talking about perennials. Annuals don't transplant very well. If you have to move an annual, it's pretty well toast. But shrubs transplant extremely well. Perennials extremely well, and trees can even be transplanted, but you're going to have to be careful with trees. The first thing to do is to prepare the location that you're moving the plant to. And generally speaking, you're digging about 1.5 times the size, a hole that's about 1.5 times the size of the root ball that you've got. And that's because you need to allow it lots of space. Plus your big heavy boots are tromping around on top of it. Then, so you've dug your hole, you go to the plant, you dig around the plant, as you know, you're allowing for lots of room for those roots. So if it's a shrub, you know, you're digging way out there. If it's a tree, you're really out there. And most trees require professional help if it's a big tree. And you're trying to keep all the roots together, because if you do that, then you have much more success when you pick the plant up and move it to its new location. So obviously perennials are really easy. You just need to get the hole ready. If it's been very dry, I actually water the hole before I put the plant in it. So then I know that it's really moist in there. And then I lay the plant down. I make sure that the hole's not too deep. So if it is, I take the plant out, I fill in the hole a little bit, you know, tamp it down a little bit, not hard, but tamp it down a little bit, put the plant back in, check to be sure that it's even with the current ground level, and then I plant it back in. And I do actually, you know, I do tamp it down so that there are no air pockets. So I'm filling in with earth all around. The air pockets aren't great for root balls. And then I'm sure to water. And I water it, I baby the plant until I'm sure that it has succeeded. So if you're planting, you know, moving a tree or planting a new tree, you got to water that tree very, very consistently through the entire first year. Make sure in the fall it's winterized with lots of water, and then you're going to start watering again in the second year. That's how most gardens, you can be sure that your garden is going to be successful. Make sure that it gets lots of water. Wow, questions are coming hard and fast. Okay, what's Jen's question? Not sure if you can see this photo, can text for the plant beside the tulips. This picture looks like, it looks a bit sagey or lavender. No, they grow to about 210, flop over at full height. My neighbors don't. I used a ring last year. Is the way, no. Okay, so, it's impossible to train a plant to do something that it naturally doesn't want to do. With the exception, of course, if you have a flowering plant and the peony has gotten, you know, the flower head is so heavy that it's starting to flop over. You know, you can buy the rings that will support perennials so that they don't flop over. But obviously, if it gets above your ring, then it's going to flop from there. You can't really avoid that without staking it. And obviously, you're not going to stake it. If it's looks really tall. I wonder if it's Russian sage. Is it a purple flower, Jen? That would be the next question. Because Russian sage is very, very tall and does tend to flop over. It doesn't matter what you do. I don't even think there's a way to hold it up, actually. I think it's really meant to kind of flop over. It's that look to the plant. So you sort of plant it accordingly. And what I do when I have plants that have lots of flowers and they're flopping is I prune, I take clippings, I take flowers off of the plant and bring it in, and which then, you know, bounces the plant back up. So if you can do that, that's probably what I would do with that plant. Use the ring though. The ring should at least get the base of it upright, because I'm thinking that that's probably, yes, it has a purple flower. Okay, Jen, I think it's Russian sage. So I think it is a tall plant, and the only way, I mean, you can do the ring so the base is supported, and then what I would do is keep taking cuttings so you have flowers inside, purple flowers inside the house, and that will free up the plant, and it'll be less heavy and less flopping over. Nikki, when can we plant vegetables? Hey, Nikki, I think you can plant vegetables just now. I mean, the ground is really starting to warm up. Look at the seed package, make sure that you know what they recommend in terms of when to sow the particular vegetable. But May 24th weekend is generally in Canada the weekend to plant all those fussy things in the ground. So I think you're good. I'm wondering where you're going to plant those vegetables. I assume that you're going to use a planter box. Ah, there you go. Nikki has raised planter box. Way to go. That'll be great. Awesome. Anything you suggest to clean up or plant between our homes? Our width is only 10 foot between. Well, this is an interesting question. So this actually brings me to one of my personal pet peeves about garden design. For me personally, I think it's really important to spend time and money and effort on the garden where it's going to be appreciated the most. So I would say between your houses is probably not the ideal place to spend a lot of time and effort. You won't see it, aren't going to look at it very often. So if you were to plant the suggested hostas, I think you'll create a slug haven in that garden bed. So my suggestion would be to mulch. I would mulch between the two houses. That would make it easy for people. I don't know if it's a pathway between your houses, but I would just protect that area with some type of mulch and not worry about it. I wouldn't, you know, I would be like a dead zone to me. You know, in terms of garden design and focus on garden design, I really do believe that, you know, it's like when you look at the exterior of a house, never paint the garage doors so that they are the dominant feature of the outside facade. They should blend in with the house. The dominant feature of your house should be your front door. So with that, I always recommend that your garden design at the front the focus should be towards your front door. So you will concentrate your effort on the pathway leading to the front door. You will concentrate your effort on containers that are at the front door. It's all about where you want your feature to be. And in the backyard, you know, same thing. In this case, it's based a little bit more about where your enjoyment is. And obviously, if you've got a deck or a patio, the enjoyment is going to be right there. So I would make sure that the gardens around are your dominant gardens. People tend to then spend a lot of time and effort on the very farthest corner because they think that from the house, that's where they're going to look. And it is true that you will look there if there's nothing else in front of it. But if you have a foreground, then the foreground should be the place where you put the most value. Um, okay. What do you recommend to prevent the husband? Oh, that is really funny. I don't know who sent this question in, but this is how. What do you recommend to prevent the husband pest from pulling out your perennials? Oh, that's really funny. Okay, so what I will say, it's not just always the husband. Sometimes it's the children, or sometimes it's your, well-meaning landscaper who, is there early in the season and doesn't realize that you have a prized hosta under their feet as they, tramp all over the garden. So yes, I hear your pain. I I told the story at the last garden seminar or webinar. I have to tell it again. My mother used to, my parents had a beautiful lilac tree, and for years and years, Mom did not understand why it was she was not getting any flowers off this tree. And I came home one springtime, and I said, well, it's because Dad keeps pruning it. He's pruning the branches off that that are the ones that should be flowering. So this is not an uncommon problem. It's not just the husband. It can be all sorts of different people. And what it is, the problem is that we forget what's in our garden. So if you can mark an area where you've planted a perennial or you've planted some bulbs, this happens to me all the time. I've forgotten that there are bulbs there. I order more bulbs. I think, oh, I need to put some bulbs in that corner. That's where it needs it. I start digging and realize, oh, I already have bulbs in there. And I'd forgotten that they were there. So if you can mark your garden, that's what you should do. If you don't want to mark your garden with a sign, then to have a drawing or a sketch of your garden and just sketch out where you've put things, because then you could just have to refer to the sketch and know. Now that's for yourself. For the rest of the people, you really have to monitor what they're doing. So, when you send your children out to weed, you're gonna have to tell them what is a weed and what is not. Either you mark the plant so that they know, or you stand over them and tell them, don't go there, don't step on that. Okay, I'm getting looks from my assistant over there, but I hope that's helpful. Elaine, hi Elaine. Two questions. We have a large stunted pine tree and have always thought about moving it to our cottage up north. Ooh. What things should I consider when making this decision? Secondly, how I have a large lot, what can I do about dandelions? Okay, well, the first question. I'm wondering how large a stunted pine tree it is, because it might be too large to move that far. Not just because it would survive. I mean, pine trees love the north. They're certainly perfectly hardy in the north. It's just, would it survive that move? So if it's really mature, really, really large, I'd say I would leave it, and I would try and buy a plant for, a tree up there, and plant it there. I'm not sure whether you would have any success, and it's certainly going to be one ton of work, and whether it's all worth it, I'm just not sure. Secondly, about the dandelions, and sadly, the dandelions are here to, we can't do anything about the dandelions unless you painstakingly go out and hand dig the dandelions. That'll get you, 1 year, but then all the dandelion seeds from your neighbors whose dandelions are still there and those seeds are blowing over to you, they're just going to replant themselves. So unfortunately, Elaine, I think dandelions are with us forever, as sad as that might be. But they love your bees, Elaine. They really love your bees, and they're great help with pollination, generally speaking. So if that makes you feel any better, that would be great. Does cutting often help? It does help because you're cutting off the seed head, the flower head, which is the seed head. So the trick is that magic, timing, and it's not possible to get them all the time. So it's a losing battle. I would just learn to live with them and appreciate them, and hope that the bees love it. All right, so after the daffodil, another question from, I assume, Facebook. After a daffodil has died, there's a lot of green leaves that are left behind. What is the best thing to do? Okay, so the best thing to do with the daffodil after it's finished blooming is to actually bend the leaves over and tie them in a knot. That is the best. You don't want to cut off the leaves, because in fact those leaves are providing the bulb with the nutrients for next year's growth. So really important to keep the leaves on until they're, spent. And by spent, I mean they've gone brown and dry. That's when you know that it's time. You can remove the leaves. Don't cut them. Don't ever cut them back. Just tie them in a knot, and everybody will know that that's what it is. And you know what? You have perennials that are growing next to it, and those perennials will take over, and you won't even notice the dead daffodil bulbs. I'm just reviewing questions here. Okay. 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 Is it better to mulch more and plant less for a professional look in the garden, or plant more for a fuller garden and mulch between plants? It's a very good question, actually. The answer to that is it depends on your personal preference. Some people like the look of, specific, plants, 1, 2, 3, with a little bit of space between them. Some people, they prefer that look. I actually prefer to plant tightly, so I always plant in 3. So if I was planting 3 geraniums, for instance, I will plant tight for those 3 geraniums, and then I will leave space around the geraniums. Not a lot of space, but a space, because I dislike that cottage garden look where everything is rambling over each other. That's a personal preference. I much prefer to have, a plant that's the focus when it's in bloom, and then it dies back and something else is in focus. And which the comment, the question leads me to just garden, again, back to garden design in general. Your garden should have a variety of seasons of interest. So you should never plant an all annual garden, or never all spring perennials, for instance, because then in the summertime your garden's going to be kind of boring. So I really like to plant a mix of plants so that I know that I have something blooming at different times of the year. But the other thing is that you can get that. It doesn't have to be a flower. It could actually be the leaf of a tree or a shrub that's providing the color or the interest. And so it's a combination of trying to remember that, design so that you have that going on in the spring, but then you know that you're going to get a fall color from the leaf, or a berry. The service berry is a wonderful shrub that has a white flower early spring, and then it gets red berries in the fall that the birds adore. So that's a valuable plant for me in my garden. I like all my plants to do something more than once. It's one of the reasons why there are some plants that I try not to have a lot of, because I think that they're kind of a limited use, because I don't see anything much special about them in the fall. Or vice versa. There's nothing about them until the fall. I like plant material to have a little bit more interest year round. So I tend to plant plant material, shrubs, trees, perennials, it doesn't matter, to give me that breadth of show in the garden. So I would say that planting more for a fuller garden and mulching between the plants is probably what I would do. But I would make sure that I would have, space between the plants, a little bit of space so things are not crowded in. I think it looks tidier, and I think it's probably looks a little bit more planned out. We talked about mulch. I don't know if anybody has any mulch questions. We talked about that a lot in the first webinar, so I haven't had any questions about it, so I'm not going to worry. Follow up to the rhodo transplant. Could the browning be? Because absolutely. So when you're transplanting something, there is always going to be a season of adjustment. So it might be that you have those brown leaves on that plant for this year, but they will eventually go. And the key is, what does the rest of the plant material look like? Do you have other green leaves? Are there new shoots, new green leaves? Because new green leaves, of course, indicate that the plant is healthy and is doing well. So, and if that's the case, then you're fine. Now we're coming up, believe it or not, I cannot believe it, there is only a few minutes left. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. It was great. I hope it was helpful and useful. Thank you for letting me ramble about one of my favorite subjects besides real estate. My name is Nancy Robertson, and I'm a real estate agent with Sotheby's International Realty Canada, but I'm also a master gardener and a former landscape designer. As I said earlier, we'd like to acknowledge the new Resiliency Fund, which is a charity that the Oakville Community Foundation is running for the first time in support of our frontline workers. Please make a small donation to them if you can. If you've enjoyed this webinar, I would be grateful. And I think maybe we'll wrap it up. What do you think there, Joanna? She's giving me the thumbs up. So thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate all of this. Thanks for the support. Have a great day. It's going to get warm. It's going to be hot this weekend. Bye, everyone. Women end. Raised her hand. Uh-oh, what does that mean?